sometimes we lack perspective. And yesterday, Mike Sando, who will be joining us in a couple hours, he came out with his annual survey of 50 NFL executives. It's called Quarterback Tiers. And it should be noted that Jayden Daniels, the rookie, got 13 more Tier 1 votes than the rest of his division combined because Jalen Hurts got 3 and Dak got 1. But it is interesting. Here's where it's different from Andrew Luck. Jayden Daniels got some breaks. Number one, he didn't go to Chicago. They can't get quarterback right. Number two, he didn't get a coach on the hot seat. Number three, he didn't get the oldest and arguably strangest ownership group in the NFL, the McCaskies. That stuff matters. Instead, he goes to Washington, and his loony owner got flushed out at the end of that last season. So he gets a new owner, new GM, new coach, new momentum, new culture, with a very, very mature number one wide receiver. And he wasn't the number one pick. He was the number 2 pick. And we always spend more time talking about the number 1 pick. So I'm not saying he landed in Kansas City like with Andy Reid and Mahomes, but ask yourself this. And I love Jayden Daniels, but this is where Andrew Luck has him beat. Think about the winningest quarterbacks in the last several years in the NFL. Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen, Jayden Hurts, Jordan Love. What do they have in common? None of them entered the league in chaos. Here's who did. Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. Not so shockingly, they've had bumpier roads and more turbulence. I mean, a great example is Bo Nix. Half the GMs were not high on him. He gets Sean Payton, a good O-line. He looks great. Caleb Williams, everybody kind of thought he was special. Bad everything. Coach, coordinators, O-line. He looks completely lost. So don't undervalue, even for somebody as good as Jayden Daniels, don't undervalue how many breaks he got. I mean, the owner, sharp. The general manager, Adam Peters, super sharp. Cliff Kingsbury may not be a head coach, excellent coordinator. The O-line, PFF had it ranked number 10, a mature receiver at number 1. And even if he wasn't mature, he's a number 1 receiver. And a very workable schedule. Remember this, Jayden Daniels only one time last year beat a playoff team. And that was against Philadelphia when Jalen Hurts got hurt, and most of the game he faced Kenny Pickett. So if you look at the quarterbacks he beat, it was Daniel Jones twice, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, and the disaster in Cleveland, Andy Dalton, Caleb Williams, Will Levis, Jake Haener, Michael Penix, Trey Lance, and Kenny Pickett. He played Lamar, Baker, and Jalen Hurts. He lost. He even lost to Russell Wilson. So 2 things can be true. I think he's just a tremendous player. But the landing spot is really crucial. And what you think of Washington is, what a mess. They weren't a mess. They had all new people. Remember before, J-Mac and I argued about this. J-Mac said, how can you be good with all that change? And I said, when all the stuff you flushed out was awful and all the new stuff is good, I am for change. And I had told you, I thought he was going to look like Lamar Jackson, not quite as nimble athletically, but much better in the pocket, and that's what happened. But do I think Jayden Daniels, if you put him in Carolina, would have been that? I do not.
Yeah. This is such a fascinating.
This is such a fascinating conversation right now because we're talking about things right now that I'm just not so sure it matters. Like, okay, this is not at all how I thought this clip was going to go at all. Which I can appreciate because it's not just, I guess, like endless praise of Jayden Daniels, which I do all the time. So it's good to have a little bit resistance to work off of. But let's unpack this first. Let's start with this though, with the whole he only beat like 1 playoff team, just a bottom line win-loss record. Now if you want to use that as a reference point for the Commanders, for you saying, I don't think the Commanders were that good or as good as an NFC Championship team, for instance, that is way more fair of a conversation because you could say, hey, they really didn't beat playoff team, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, right, that could be fair. But to lump that on, Jayden Daniels is where I'm just kind of like, that doesn't really make sense because when he played a playoff team, for instance, let's take one like the ball against the Baltimore Ravens. Did he just play awful? Was he just overwhelmed? Did he throw 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions and a fumble? Like, no, that didn't happen when he went up against the Steelers. Is that what happened? Right? Like that's not how these things unfolded. He played the Bucs the first game. I believe it was game 1 of his entire NFL career, obviously, right? Because I assume that's obviously in order now. Right? And yeah, Jalen Hurts was injured in that game, and when that game happened, I said both teams need to throw it out. I was very firm on that. I was like, the Eagles need to throw that game out, and the Commanders need to throw that game out. It's too weird of a game for both people. But then I was able to like isolate the major positives of Jayden Daniels in that game, right? I mean, he had some negatives. He threw some really bad interceptions, but then he overcame that. Was able to, obviously have a game-winning drive. Beautiful throws. It was great. You also had a Devontae Smith drop pass. Like, it was just a bizarre game, but you could still see big-time moments, big-time plays. Not unlike when we watched Lamar Jackson versus Joe Burrow in one of their games where they were both turning the ball over a couple times. It was crazy. It was back and forth. And it was just like you saw that with Jayden Daniels and the Philadelphia Eagles. Jayden Daniels and the Commanders versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Whether it was Jalen Hurts or not, that was kind of the style and the flow of the game where it was like, man, there's fumbles, there's turnovers, there's interceptions, there's drop passes. Like, this game has a little bit of it all. And even Jayden Daniels is making a couple mistakes, like we've seen Lamar, like we've seen Burrow do in a back and forth. And yet both quarterbacks still don't flinch, right? So like, whatever, keep going. And you saw that out of Jayden Daniels. So again, whether or not Jalen Hurts was playing or not doesn't really matter. Did it help why you could say that the Commanders won that game? Yeah, of course. Absolutely. The Philadelphia Eagles with Jalen Hurts won the Super Bowl. So like, of course. But that's why I said throw that game out, but I could still evaluate the quarterback play. It's harder to evaluate the team play and be like, what do I do with this? The Commanders fumbled the ball a million times. Jalen Hurts went down. Devontae's dropping the easiest pass where if he just catches that, it was like a 6-yard pass where if he just catches it, that's the game. Commanders don't win that, So it was a bizarre game. But I can still evaluate the play in a vacuum. And you could do that for all these games. That's just like the easiest example because it was obviously the Super Bowl winning team, division, etc., etc. But these were great games. These were big-time games, big-time moments, and still a rookie at that. But it is interesting because you do hear that stat that Colin just said right here about, only beating, one football team. They do that for Bo Nix. You hear that for Bo Nix and Denver Broncos like nonstop to the point where you would think that didn't exist for Jayden Daniels. So it is interesting. But Jayden Daniels then you say you only beat one playoff team, but then like he then beat 2 playoff teams in the playoffs. Like it's a little different there. It's like, yeah, he lost to Baker Mayfield and then beat him in the playoffs. There's a difference there. So I don't lose too much sleep over that. Especially from a rookie. This is year 3. This is year 4. And we consistently see Jayden Daniels not playing as well versus playoff teams or something like that. Right? Like we've seen that trend with the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott. Then that becomes a trend. That becomes something a little bit more real. And again, it could still has to be separated between quarterback and team. There can be a stretch of time where Jayden Daniels is still playing really well, looks good, but against playoff teams, the Commanders just can't seem to put it all together. It's like, again, that's on the command. That's on the Commanders, not necessarily on Jayden Daniels individually. You always have to kind of separate those two and combine them. Like, it's just, it's a little bit of everything. So that's why I'm never a big fan of just these blanket statements of like, oh, only 1-6 against that. And it's like, again, if we're talking about how good are the Commanders, it's like that statement makes sense. If we're talking about the quarterback, it's like, well, wait a second. How did these games unfold? What actually is happening? Do they have any run support? Do they have a run game? How many points did the defense give up? Like there's so many factors at play there. An insane amount of factors. Gene Daniels played pretty well against the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship game. He didn't play great. He didn't play elite. Wasn't one of his best games. He got flustered a little bit. Like he looked comfortable and confident, but like the Eagles had an A-top defense in the NFL. They beat him. He wasn't perfect, but was he blowout bad? Not at all, right? Like they got blown out, and it wasn't just because Jane Daniels couldn't keep up. So you need to watch the games. You need to see how all this unfolds. In terms of going to a great spot, absolutely. That cannot be downplayed. And I bang that drum all the time. All the time. All the time. All the time. Talk about teams that, it is a luxury to get drafted to the Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia, right? If Andy Reid's your coach, Hal Roseman's your GM, Sean McVay is your coach, and your GM pretty much, it's just different, I mean, really the top teams that you can get drafted to, especially most recently right now, I mean, it's the Eagles, it's the Chiefs, it's the Rams. Those are probably my top 3 teams that if you're a quarterback that you're going to go to. The 49ers with Shanahan, Minnesota Vikings, with Kevin Unnell, like those things really do matter. And so, right, I agree because he's saying, oh, Jane Daniels wouldn't be like this if he got to the Carolina Panthers. And like I 100% agree with that. And I also feel that way if it was Patrick Mahomes as well. I mean, I've used that example a million times now. It's just like if Patrick Mahomes gets drafted to the Carolina Panthers or the Cleveland Browns, like he's not Patrick Mahomes, but I don't think any quarterback is. So again, when you make statements like this, I think it's important because a lot of people, from my experience when I've made comments like that, people have panic attacks because they think that if I make a statement, because again, I've made that statement mostly with Mahomes and whatnot, but even Jalen Hurts, that people then automatically assume that you're saying, oh, so if Josh Allen went to the Carolina Panthers, he'd be just as great. And it's like, no, just like I can't list every single quarterback in every single clip I make. But I agree with the sentiment of what Colin is saying to a degree, depending on which aspect of this conversation we're talking about. But I still think that a great deal of nuance needs to be added to it. Because, yeah, I mean, it is always interesting to me because when you're as good as of a quarterback as a Jayden Daniels, you definitely start to get a very strong belief in them from the fans. And there's that aura, right? That's very popular these days. And there is this feeling that like this quarterback is inevitable. And no matter where he is, no matter what the situation he's in, no matter who the coach is, no matter who his receivers are, and it's just not the way it works for any quarterback in the history of the NFL. It's just not. And I really feel as though the Commanders fans should understand that because their team has been so poorly run for so long, and poorly owned that you could not just throw in Jin Daniels throughout those years. Would you have been a better team? Would you have had more stability? Absolutely. But would it have looked like this if you brought Jayden Daniels, I don't know, take one of your worst years, worst coaching staffs, worst rosters in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. I don't, pick your pick whoever you want. Pick whichever coach you want, whatever roster you want. You can't just throw in Jane Daniels in there and then magically, boom, you're at the NFC Championship game. Like, this team needed Dan Quinn. This team needed Cliff Kingsbury. This team needed Jayden Daniels. This team needed Terry McLaurin, Zach Z, etc. Like they needed all of these things together. You could have had this exact roster. And if you didn't have Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury, I'm not so sure. If you had Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron and this exact roster, would you have been better than than Caleb Williams? I think so. Would you have gotten to the NFC Championship game? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. So, this is a belief in what they've built, not just Jayden Daniels. And again, that's okay. I am so firm on this. It's like if Patrick Mahomes gets drafted to the Kansas City Chiefs, I do not think, or excuse me, if he gets drafted to the Cincinnati Bengals, he does not have 3 Super Bowls. You can make the argument maybe he gets to the 1, but it's like, I don't know. That old line was really, really bad. I don't know at that point of his career too. Probably not. I'm not sure any quarterback really necessarily wins in the sea with the Cincinnati Bengals. I'd have to think about that longer. The way how the Pittsburgh Steelers have been the last 10 years, I don't know what quarterback you could just throw in there and magically start winning rings. Josh Allen, Lamar. I mean, like, again, could those teams improve for sure? But like, it's like, again, if you put Jin Daniels in his like, this year, I get, like in I don't want to say his prime because we don't know what that necessarily looks like right now. But like how he played last year, we put him on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Are they knocking out the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game? Are they beating the Buffalo Bills? No, they're not. Are they beating the Baltimore Ravens in the wild card round? Number, do they look better? Do they look smoother? Do they have more versatility? Absolutely. Are they beating the Ravens or the Bills number? So it takes a lot, which we often just forget because we talk so much about quarterbacks because ultimately that matters because it is kind of funny. We even a graphic like this opposing quarterbacks versus commanders. This always still implies that it's like one-on-one basketball. Shouldn't it be like opposing quarterbacks versus, or excuse me, like opposing defenses versus commanders or something like defensive ranks versus, I don't know, just something a little bit more nuanced. But even that gets lost because they could have a great defense, but an absolute awful offense, or they could have a great offense. The Kyler Murray, the Cardinals could have I'll just use the Bengals. That's obviously the easiest one. Amazing offense, awful defense, not a playoff team. So it's just, it's why you got to watch the games, honestly. And it's why I'm a firm believer in eventually letting go of the past like this because it's too hard to remember exactly how these games unfolded, like really understand the nuance. You can remember a little bit, but you don't really remember exactly the flow of the game. That weird moment when so-and-so got tripped up and then, now it's 2nd and 13 instead of 2nd and 4, you just forget those little nuances. And you forget that moment of like, oh man, it was 2nd and 13. And then Jayden Daniels was about to take a huge sack, which would have been 3rd long, and then they would have been out of field goal range. But instead, he made a big play. He converted the 1st down, whatever. You just forget those little things. You can remember some of the bigger moments, but you forget some of the little nuance. Responses, then it becomes too hard to really like wrap your head around all of it. So, I thought we were letting go of last season or so, but we're still kind of sitting with it right now. And, it just is what it is. Those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Washington Commanders and Jayden Daniels? Do you think Jayden can sustain success in year 2? Do you think he can sustain that success? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all generally feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.